I heard my wife call me a burden because she forgot to hang up the phone. She and her parents were in the car, talking about my house like I was already gone. $955,000 in walls. They wanted to turn into family security for a $520,000 hotel deal I had never agreed to, so I stayed quiet. I let them fly to Europe, and when they came home, the house was empty. Their plan was dead on the kitchen island, and the note I left behind only told them half of what I knew. I used to think silence kept a marriage peaceful. Now I know silence can become the place where other people build plans over your life. The hardest part wasn't hearing the word burden. It was realizing they had practiced saying it before I ever heard it. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Then stay with me, because what I found after that note was worse than the word burden. I parked my old Ford half a mile down the road, just past the line of red maples, where the shoulder widened enough for a truck to sit without drawing attention. From there, I could see the bend in the driveway. Not the front door clearly, not the windows, just enough. Enough to know when they came back. The late October air in Leelanau County had that sharp edge it gets before winter settles in. The kind of cold that finds the space between your collar and your neck. I kept both hands on the steering wheel, even though the engine was off. Corey's rental car turned in at 4:18. I know because I looked at the clock on the dash. She got out first. My wife still had the soft gray scarf she bought in Paris wrapped around her neck. She moved like someone coming home from a good trip, tired but pleased with herself. Her suitcase rolled behind her, smooth and expensive, bumping once over the stone path I had laid myself 12 summers earlier. Lowell stepped out next, already annoyed. He hated Michigan cold, unless he was describing it to someone else as charming. He adjusted his coat, looked toward the garage, and frowned like the house had failed to greet him properly. Verity came last, slower, careful with a little paper shopping bag looped around her wrist, probably some polite European gift she expected to hand me with a kiss on the cheek and a sentence like, "We thought of you, Rex." That was the thing about people like Verity. They could plan around your life and still bring you a souvenir. From the road, the house looked the same. White trim, wide porch, front windows catching the last weak light over the trees. The maple in the side yard had dropped half its leaves, and a few of them were gathered against the steps, but I knew what waited inside. No tools in the garage, no files in the office, no framed fishing photo of my father on the hallway wall, no old radio on the workbench, no life left lying around for them to use, borrow, measure, or explain away. Everything that mattered had been removed carefully, legally, quietly. Corey tried the front door. It opened. I saw her pause. That pause told me she heard it before she understood it. Empty rooms have a sound. Anyone who has ever moved out of a house knows it. Footsteps come back at you. Suitcase wheels scrape louder. A voice travels farther than it should. Lowell went in behind her. A few seconds later, I saw him turn sharply, as if the bare living room had insulted him. Then his voice carried through the open doorway. "Rex?" Not worried, irritated, like I had misplaced myself. Verity stepped in after him, and the door stayed open long enough for me to picture what they were seeing. The living room stripped down. The space where our wedding photo used to hang. The kitchen visible beyond it, clean and still. And on the kitchen island, a plain white envelope. I had placed it there that morning with both hands. I remember that more clearly than I expected. The paper felt heavier than it was. I folded the note once, slid it inside, and wrote 3 names across the front. Corey, Lowell, Verity. Not family. Not my wife and in-laws. Their names. Because people should have to stand inside the things they do. I could not see Corey open it from where I sat, but I knew the timing. I had rehearsed it in my mind against my will. She would pick it up first. Lowell would hover too close. Verity would pretend not to be nervous until the first line changed the air in the room. The note said, Corey, Lowell, Verity. I heard the call. I heard the word burden. I found the family security folder, the $520,000 hotel commitment, and the email that called me manageable. My house is not collateral. My silence was not consent. My marriage was not permission. The home you plan to use is no longer available to you. Neither am I. All further contact goes through Marin Quill. Rex. A minute passed. Then Corey's little Paris bag slipped from her hand and landed on the floor. Even from the truck, I saw Lowell snatch the paper from her. That was Lowell. If something went wrong, he grabbed control before he grabbed truth. Verity moved toward the kitchen island and put one hand on the counter. Her mouth opened. I could almost hear her. He can't do this. But he had. I had. And that was what none of them had prepared for. People think revenge comes with shouting. They picture slammed doors, broken dishes, ugly words said in the driveway while neighbors pretend not to listen. Mine did not sound like that. Mine sounded like packing tape pulled across cardboard, like a lawyer sealing certified letters, like movers carrying my father's tool chest down the garage steps. Like an old man wrapping a broken coffee mug in yesterday's newspaper because he could not bring himself to throw it away. I did not feel happy watching them stand inside that hollow house. Happy would have been too simple. What I felt was steadier than that, and sadder. I had not emptied that house to hurt them. I emptied it because they had already emptied it of respect. By the time they came home from Europe, the walls were only catching up. Corey stepped back onto the porch a few minutes later. She looked toward the driveway, then the road, then the trees. For 1 second, I thought she might see the truck. She did not. I started the engine before my courage could turn into pity. The Ford rumbled low, and I pulled away slowly, keeping my eyes on the road ahead. To understand why I left that note instead of waiting in the doorway, you have to understand the first name my family ever gave me, the easy one. That name did not start with Corey. It started in my parents' kitchen, back when I was still small enough to believe adults chose words carefully. I was the youngest Calder. Garrick was the oldest, loud and sure of himself before he had earned either one. Sabra came next, sharp, organized, the kind of girl teachers trusted with attendance sheets and medicine cabinets. Then there was me, Rex, the one who could wait, the one who could take the smaller piece, the one who didn't mind. My mother, Althea, never said those words with cruelty. That almost made it harder. She would pat my shoulder and say, "Rex will manage. He always does." People think being overlooked feels like being hated. It does not. Most of the time, it feels like being useful. At Thanksgiving, I gave up the good chair when relatives came over. If my father needed somebody to run out for ice, I went. If Garrick borrowed money and forgot to pay it back, I was told not to make a fuss. If Sabra needed help moving, I showed up with a truck and a bad back waiting for me the next day. Nobody called it taking. They called it family. After my father died, the pattern became official. There was a small insurance payout, nothing that could change a life, but enough to matter. Garrick had debts. Sabra had repairs on her place. My mother looked tired in a way I had never seen before. I remember sitting at the dining table with a pen in my hand while everyone explained what made sense. "You're single, Rex. You've always been good with your hands. You'll land on your feet." So I signed away more than I should have. I kept my father's old watch, his toolbox, and a Navy coffee mug with a glued handle. That was my inheritance. Years later, I bought the house near the lake by working every hour I could get. Resort maintenance, emergency calls, roof leaks in February, furnaces that quit on Christmas Eve. I did not build wealth in a boardroom. I built it with sore knees and cracked hands. By the time I met Corey, I thought that part of my life was behind me. She liked my steadiness. She said it made her feel safe. "You don't rattle easy," she told me once, sitting on the porch with her bare feet tucked under her. "Most men your age are either trying to prove something or running from something." I laughed because it sounded like praise. Maybe it was, back then. But kindness has a shadow. If you give too much of it to the wrong people, they start treating it like a contract. Lowell and Verity came into our marriage slowly at first. Sunday dinners, holiday plans, casual advice. Then their advice started arriving whether I asked for it or not. Lowell walked through my garage one afternoon, looking at the cabinets I had built myself. "Lot of responsibility for one man," he said. "It keeps me busy." "At your age, busy isn't always smart." Verity said it softer. "You and Corey should think ahead, dear. A smaller place might be a blessing." Corey would stand between us, smiling like she was smoothing a tablecloth. "They're just worried about us, Rex." That became the sentence that covered everything. They're just worried. They mean well, Don't take it that way. Then came the phrase I heard more and more. Family security. Lowell said it at dinner. Verity said it over coffee. Curry said it while sorting mail at the kitchen island. It's not about pressure, she told me. It's about being practical. Practical is a funny word. People use it when they want something but do not want to sound hungry. 3 weeks before I left that note, Curry was packing for Europe with her parents. Italy, France, Switzerland. She had outfits laid across the bed and a checklist on her phone. I carried her suitcase downstairs because she said the handle was awkward. At the door, she touched my arm. Promise me you'll think about next steps while I'm gone. What next steps? She gave me that patient look people use when they have already had the real conversation without you. The house. The future. Us. We can't keep pretending nothing has to change. Lowell, standing by the car, smiled like he had heard enough. Maybe when we get back, Rex will finally make the smart decision. Verity added, family should help family. I nodded because that was what I had been trained to do. Later that afternoon, after they left for the airport, I went into my home office and started sorting old maintenance records into storage boxes. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the scrape of cardboard on the floor. My phone rang from the workbench in the garage. By the time I reached it, the screen had gone dark. Missed call from Curry. A voicemail notification appeared a few seconds later. I stood there with one hand on a box marked tax records, telling myself it was probably nothing. A reminder, a gate code, a forgotten charger. The voicemail sat on my screen for less than 10 minutes before I pressed play, and by the time it ended, I no longer recognized my own marriage. I did not play the message right away. That sounds strange now, considering what it became, but at that moment, I was still a husband doing ordinary husband things. I carried the last storage box into the office, set it beside the filing cabinet, and wiped dust from my palms onto my jeans. Curry forgot things all the time when she traveled. A charger, a hotel confirmation, the code to the side door. Once she called me from O'Hare because she could not remember if she had unplugged her curling iron. So when I saw her voicemail, I expected something small. I pressed play while standing beside the workbench. At first, there was only noise. A car door closing. A zipper. Lowell clearing his throat. Then Curry laughed. Not the laugh she used with me in the kitchen. This one was lighter, freer, like she had stepped out of our marriage and into a room where I was not expected to enter. I swear, if he starts in about the house again, I'm going to lose patience, she said. Lowell answered. Then don't give him room to start. When we get back, we push harder. My hand tightened around the phone. Verity's voice came next, calm as a Sunday bulletin. It has to be framed as relief, not pressure. Men his age don't like to feel managed. Curry sighed. I know. He's been a good man, but lately he's just… There was a pause. A small one. Then she finished the sentence. A burden. The garage went so still I could hear the old freezer clicking in the corner. I replayed it. Not because I wanted to, because part of me believed I had misheard. The second time was worse. The word did not change. Her voice did not soften. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said, that's not fair. Nobody said Rex has carried more than his share. Lowell only said, then stop treating him like the decision maker. That was when my father's Navy mug slipped from the shelf beside my elbow. I reached for it too late. It hit the concrete, and the old glued handle broke clean off. I stood there looking at it, phone in one hand, broken handle by my boot, and I remember thinking how quiet betrayal can be when it comes from people who know where you keep the good plates. I did not call her back. I did not text, what did you mean by that? I walked into the kitchen and sat at the table where Curry and I had eaten soup on snowy nights, signed Christmas cards, talked about retirement, and hosted her parents more times than I could count. That table had heard grace before meals. Now it heard my wife call me wait. Insults from strangers can sting, but you can walk away from them. When someone close to you says the ugly thing, it crawls backward through your life and touches every memory. Driving Verity home after her cataract surgery, fixing Lowell's basement pump at 10:30 at night, covering Curry's nonprofit dinner expenses when a sponsor backed out, standing in church beside them while people said, "You're lucky to have Rex." All of it rearranged itself around that one word, burden. I slept maybe 2 hours that night, if what I did could be called sleeping. Mostly I moved from room to room, not turning on lights, listening to the house settle. By morning, I had almost talked myself down. Maybe they were tired. Maybe airport stress made people careless. Maybe I was being too sensitive. That old habit returned fast, the one that asks a wounded man to prove he has the right to bleed. After coffee, I went back into the office. I told myself I would sort paperwork and keep my hands busy. Bank statements in one pile, insurance in another, house records in the cabinet. That was when I found the folder. It had been tucked behind a stack of nonprofit donor binders. Curry kept on the lower shelf. Dark blue. New label. Clean white tab. Family security planning. I stared at those words for a long moment. Then I opened it. The first few pages looked harmless if you did not know how to read between lines. Printed spreadsheets, notes in Lowell's blocky handwriting, a list titled Future Housing Transition. Another page said Asset Restructuring Options. My address appeared 3 times. Not our home. Not Rex's house. Property. Projected liquidity. Equity availability. There were condo brochures clipped to the back. Smaller places near town. Easier maintenance. 1 floor. Close to medical care. On a yellow sticky note, someone had written, "Do not say forced move. Say relief." Under that, in Corey's handwriting, mention his back. Mention fatigue. Mention how much easier life could be. I sat down before my legs decided for me. Nothing in that folder shouted. That was the worst part. It was organized, polite, almost professional. The kind of thing people could defend later by saying, "We were only planning." But planning without the person affected is not care. It is control in a clean shirt. I took out my phone and photographed every page. Slowly, carefully. I made sure the corners showed, the dates showed, the handwriting showed. Then I placed each sheet back exactly where it had been. That was the first smart thing I did. Not because I felt strong. I did it because some small, stubborn part of me understood that if I confronted them with hurt feelings, they would turn it into confusion. If I confronted them with proof, the conversation would have less room to wiggle. Before I closed the folder, 1 page near the back caught my eye. It was not complete, just part of an email thread, printed and tucked behind the condo brochures. The subject line mentioned funding timelines. The body was mostly hidden under another sheet, but one sentence was clear enough. I thought the folder was the worst thing I would find, but buried inside that printed email was a sentence that made the voicemail sound almost harmless. I pulled the printed email from the back of the folder and laid it flat on the dining table. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old wall clock near the pantry. Outside, the lake looked peaceful through the glass. That bothered me more than thunder would have. The world had no idea my marriage had just shifted under my feet. The email was not long. It looked ordinary enough, the kind of thing a person could skim without noticing the poison in it. Subject: Mariner House Funding Timeline. A few names were copied at the top. Lowell's, Curry's, a man named Blaze Renner, someone from a legal office I did not recognize. Then I read the line that stopped me. Rex remains manageable if we keep the timeline moving. Manageable. I said it once under my breath. Not loud, just enough to hear how ugly it sounded in my own kitchen. Being called a burden had hurt like a private insult. But manageable was different. That word did not come from anger. It came from planning. It was the kind of word people used when they were not thinking about your heart, your history, or the roof you had repaired in the rain. They were thinking about how to move you. I read the email again. Then again. A strange calm came over me. Not peace, but something colder. Every conversation from the past 6 months lined up in my head like receipts. Corey saying, "Maybe we should simplify." Lowell saying, "Equity sitting idle is not smart." Verity saying, "A smaller place would be easier on your back." All those soft voices, all those careful smiles. They had not been worried about me. They had been working me. I kept reading. The Mariner House Hotel was listed in several documents, sometimes by full name, sometimes just as the Inn Project. 26 rooms, wedding weekends, wine trail traffic, waterfront marketing. It sounded like the kind of investment Lowell would admire because he could describe it over lunch at the club and watch people lean in. One page showed a capital commitment, $520,000. I stared at that number until the ink blurred. Under anticipated funding sources, no one had written my name. They were too polished for that. Instead, I saw phrases that made my stomach tighten. Expected residential transition, projected property release, post-transition liquidity, residential component must remain on schedule. I leaned back in the chair and looked toward the hallway, toward the framed photo of Kuri and me in front of the maple tree after we planted it. I remembered her laughing that day because my boots were muddy and her hair kept blowing across her face. Now, inside that folder, I was not her husband. I was the residential component. That is how people take your life apart without sounding cruel. They rename it. A home becomes an asset. A marriage becomes access. A man becomes a problem to manage. I stood up because sitting still made me feel trapped. I walked to the sink, ran water into a glass, and left it untouched on the counter. Then I went back to the table and started doing what I knew how to do from years in maintenance. When something breaks, you do not panic. You find the source. You document the damage. You shut off whatever can make it worse. I photographed every page with my phone. Not rushed, not shaky. I made sure the headers were visible, the email dates clear, the attachment names readable. Rex House Equity Plan, Transition Options, Mariner Bridge Funding, Family Security Draft. One attachment was only a printout summary, but it listed my home's estimated value as $955,000, circled in blue pen. Beside it, someone had written, "Almost $1 million locked in walls." I knew Lowell's handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards, dinner checks, and notes he left beside tools he borrowed and never returned. That one sentence did something to me. They saw trapped money. I saw Saturdays on a ladder. I saw my father's toolbox open on the garage floor. I saw winter mornings clearing ice from the steps before Kuri woke up. I saw every choice I had made to turn that place from a structure into a life. A little after 7, my phone buzzed. A text from Kuri. Made it to Paris, exhausted but happy. Please don't overthink what Dad said about the house. We all want what's best. I looked at those words for a long time. We all want what's best. People say that when they want you to stop asking, best for who? I typed 3 different replies. What is the Mariner House? Why am I called manageable? Did you forget I am your husband? I deleted every one. If I asked too soon, they would clean up the mess before I understood it. They would call me dramatic, confused, sensitive. Lowell would say, "Rex, you're reading business language like a personal attack." Verity would sigh and tell me nobody meant harm. Kuri would cry, and I would spend the next hour comforting the woman who helped put my future in a folder, so I did not answer. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop and backed up every photograph. Then I copied them onto a flash drive and put it in the pocket of my work jacket. By 9 that night, the dining table was clear again. The family security folder was back exactly where I found it. The chairs were pushed in. The house looked normal. That was the most frightening part. A betrayal can sit in the next room and still let the curtains hang straight. I went to the garage before bed and picked up the broken handle from my father's mug. I held it for a while, then set it beside the cup instead of throwing it away. That night, I nearly called Kuri and demanded answers. But before my hand reached the phone, I remembered one more drawer in the office, the bottom drawer, the one Kuri used for old donor files and envelopes she never wanted to sort. I opened it, and what I found there made confrontation seem far too small. The bottom drawer stuck halfway, the way it always did when Michigan air turned damp. I pulled harder than I meant to, and the whole thing jerked open with a wooden scrape. Old donor envelopes slid forward. A packet of blank thank you cards spilled onto the floor. Behind them was a slim manila folder I had never seen before. No label, just my name written in pencil across the tab. Rex. I stood there for a while before touching it. By then, it was after midnight. The house had that late-night silence where every sound seems too personal. I carried the folder to the dining table, moved the hotel papers aside, and opened it under the yellow light above the chairs. These pages were not about money at first. That made them worse. Notes about memory concerns, notes about household safety, A printed article on older adults resisting necessary transitions. A checklist titled Future Decision-Making Support. One line was underlined twice. Rex may require guided choices if resistance increases. I read that sentence and felt the room tilt in a way I could not blame on age, tiredness, or an empty stomach. Resistance. That was what they called it when a man did not want his home turned into collateral. Not disagreement, not ownership. Resistance. I found another page with Corey's handwriting in the margin. Mention missed dentist appointment. Mention back pain. Mention he gets quiet when pressured. I sat down slowly. There are betrayals that make you angry. Then there are betrayals that make you check your own hands, your own memory, your own mind, just to make sure you are still standing where you think you are. For almost an hour, I questioned myself. Had I forgotten things? Had I been harder to live with? Had I missed signs everybody else could see? That is how dangerous this kind of planning is. It does not have to be true to do damage. It only has to make you wonder whether other people have already started believing it. Around 2 in the morning, I nearly called Corey. I even opened her contact. I wanted her to say, "Rex, no. You've got this all wrong." I wanted to be embarrassed instead of betrayed. I wanted a foolish explanation more than I wanted to be right. But then I saw another printed email, folded behind the checklist. Lowell had written to someone named Blaze. If future capacity concerns become relevant, we need to know how quickly documents can be prepared. Timing matters before the residential component becomes uncooperative. Uncooperative. There it was again. The truth hiding inside professional language. I put the phone face down. Calling her would not give me truth. It would give them warning. By sunrise, I had made copies of everything. I drove into town after breakfast, not because I knew what to do, but because staying in that house made me feel like the walls were listening. I stopped at the marina to check on an old dock repair I had promised to look at before the weather turned. A young guy named Nolan was replacing boards near the slip office. I had seen him around. Quiet fellow, divorced the year before. His relatives, from what I heard, treated him like one bad year had erased every decent thing he had ever done. He noticed I was distracted. "You all right, Rex?" Trying to figure out when concern turns into control. He gave a short laugh, not amused, just familiar with the subject. "People get comfortable deciding who you are," he said, driving a screw into the board. "Hard part is proving them wrong without becoming what they already call you." I carried that sentence with me all the way to Marin Quill's office. Marin was not flashy. No dramatic desk. No wall of intimidating plaques. Just a neat conference room, strong coffee, and a woman who had spent enough years in real estate and estate law to know trouble when it came wearing good manners. I handed her copies in order. Voicemail transcript, family security pages, hotel emails, capacity notes, the folder with my name on it. She read quietly. That was what impressed me most. She did not gasp, did not flatter me, did not say what I wanted to hear. She took notes with a blue pen and asked precise questions. "Is the house titled only in your name?" "Yes." "Purchased before the marriage?" "Yes." "Any signed agreement giving Corey authority over it?" "No." "Any power of attorney?" "No." "Any recent medical diagnosis affecting decision-making?" "No." She leaned back then and looked at me over her glasses. "Rex, nothing here means they can simply take control of your life." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Then she continued, "But if you signed the wrong thing at the wrong time, especially under family pressure, they could make your life very difficult." That was the sentence that changed the shape of the whole room. Marin slid a yellow legal pad toward me. "From this point forward, you do not discuss property, equity, relocation, guarantees, loans, or investment commitments with anyone involved. Not casually, not over dinner, not because your wife cries, not because Lowell raises his voice." I nodded. She wrote a list. Secure financial accounts, freeze credit, update directives, change passwords, preserve originals, document contact. Then she looked at me again, softer this time. "This is not family planning. This is financial pressure with your name attached." I left her office in the afternoon with a folder under my arm and a different kind of weight in my chest. The hurt was still there, so was fear. But underneath both was something sturdier. A line. Marin's final question followed me all the way home. If this house represents your freedom, Rex, why are you waiting for someone else to decide what happens to it? Marin's question did not leave me when I pulled into my driveway. It sat beside me while I shut off the truck. It followed me into the garage, past the shelf where my father's mug sat without its handle. It stayed with me while I locked the door, washed my face, and stood in the dark bedroom looking at the space where Corey's suitcase had been. Why was I waiting? The answer was not noble. I was waiting because I had spent most of my life doing that. Waiting for people to calm down, waiting for the right moment, waiting until nobody would be disappointed in me. 2 nights passed that way. I slept in pieces. I made coffee. I barely drank. I answered Curry's pleasant travel texts with short, harmless replies. Glad you made it. Hope the weather holds. Take care. Not one word about the folder. Not one word about the voicemail. By the 3rd morning, I called the realtor Marin recommended. Calla Drayton did not waste words. She came to the house at 10, parked in the garage so no one driving by would notice, and walked through the rooms with a clipboard instead of compliments. This stays private, she said. No sign. No online listing. Qualified buyers only. The house is separate property, I told her. Marin already briefed me. That sentence alone steadied me. Calla estimated the value close to $955,000. Hearing the number from a professional should have made me proud. Instead, I looked at the porch I had rebuilt, the trim I had painted, the maple outside the kitchen window, and felt like someone had put a price tag on my ribs. Still, I signed the listing agreement. My hand did not shake. That surprised me. Courage is not always a fire in your chest. Sometimes it is a tired man signing one clean page because the alternative is letting others spend his future. The buyer came quicker than I expected. A retired couple from Illinois. They had sold their place near Rockford and wanted water, quiet, and a home their grandchildren would visit. They loved the workshop. The wife loved the kitchen light. The husband ran his hand along the porch rail and said, "Somebody took care of this place." I almost had to step away, because he was right. Somebody had. Once the offer was in motion, Marin handled the legal side. Calla handled the showing notes. I handled the hardest part. I rented a small cottage near the lake, under a short-term lease. 1 bedroom, 1 clean kitchen, a view of reeds moving in the wind. Nothing fancy, nothing that announced success. But when I turned the key the first time, nobody else's plans walked in behind me. Then I began sorting my life. Keep, store, donate, leave for Corey. I did not touch what was clearly hers, except to have it packed and stored properly. Marin made sure of that. I was not trying to punish my wife through furniture. I was protecting myself from a scheme that had already crossed too many lines. The movers came on a Tuesday morning, while Corey and her parents were somewhere between Switzerland and France. I made them coffee. They worked carefully. Men who move houses for a living understand silence better than most people think. My father's toolbox went first, then the fishing rod, then boxes of maintenance records, old photographs, winter coats, books, and the recipe cards my mother had written in blue ink. By noon, the living room looked unfamiliar. By 3, the garage no longer felt like mine. I found the broken mug wrapped in a shop towel near the workbench. The handle sat inside it like a bone that belonged to the wrong body. Corey had cracked it years earlier while unloading the dishwasher and offered to buy me a new one. I had told her no. It still holds coffee. Standing there with packing paper in my hands, I realized I had given that mug more patience than some people had given me. I wrapped it anyway. Broken did not mean worthless, but it did mean I had to stop pretending the crack was not there. Late that afternoon, while checking the office one final time, I found another thin stack of papers slipped behind old tax envelopes. Not a full file, just enough. Updated capital deadlines. A request for proof of liquidity. A message from Blaze Renner asking Lowell whether the family-backed property security was still on track. The date was recent, too recent. The hotel deal was not waiting politely in the distance. It was pressing against the door. I copied those papers too, then placed the originals back where they had been. By then, I was no longer acting from hurt. Hurt had opened my eyes. Evidence was guiding my hands. On the final day, I walked through the house alone. The rooms echoed, but not like failure, more like an answer finally spoken out loud. In the bedroom, I paused where Kuri used to leave her earrings on the dresser. In the kitchen, I rested my palm on the island. In the garage, I looked at the empty wall where my tools had hung in neat rows. I loved that house. I did not regret leaving it. Those two truths stood side by side without fighting. Before I locked up, I placed one white envelope on the kitchen island. I had not written the note yet. Not fully, but I knew who it was for. The day the movers left, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The first real battle started when Kuri came home and discovered there was nothing left to control. The cottage was only 12 minutes from the old house, but it felt like another country. One bedroom, pine cabinets, a narrow porch facing the reeds. My father's broken mug sat on the kitchen shelf, handle tucked inside it, as if it had come along to remind me what a crack looks like when nobody denies it. Kuri landed back in Michigan late in the afternoon. At 4:41, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. At 4:43, she called again. Then came Lowell, then Kuri again, then Verity. The messages started confused. Rex, where are you? Why is the house like this? Then impatient. This is not funny. Call me right now. By the seventh voicemail, Lowell took over. Rex, you need to stop acting emotional and pick up the phone. People are counting on grown-up decisions here. That told me plenty. Not, are you safe? Not, what happened to us? People are counting. I sat at the cottage table with a legal pad Marin had given me. Every call, every text, every voicemail went into the log. Time, sender, exact words. I did not answer one. By early evening, a text from Kuri arrived. You embarrassed me in front of my parents. Whatever you think you heard, this is not how a husband behaves. I stared at the word husband. Funny how marriage only became sacred after I stopped being useful. At 6:20, Orson Vale called. He lived 2 doors down from the old place and had helped me plant the maple years before. I'm not asking where you are, he said. Just telling you Lowell was at Calla Drayton's office raising his voice. What did he want? Records, buyer names, access. He kept saying there had been a family misunderstanding. I closed my eyes. And Calla? She told him to speak with your attorney, calm as a librarian with a loaded stamp pad. That almost made me smile. The next morning, Marin called before 9. Her voice had that careful tone lawyers use when the news is bad, but not surprising. They are starting a narrative, Rex. What kind? Stress, isolation, emotional instability, poor judgment. Nothing formal yet, but enough to prepare the room. The room. I knew exactly what she meant. Lowell had spent his whole life in rooms where a polished sentence could become reality if enough people nodded. They're saying I lost my mind because I protected my house. They're saying whatever helps them explain why you acted without them. There was the truth. People applaud your independence until it interferes with their access. Then suddenly, you are difficult, irrational, selfish, unstable. Later that afternoon, another message came through Marin. The hotel investment group was asking questions. The expected capital had not appeared. Timelines were slipping. A bridge funding deadline was close. That was when I finally understood their panic. They were not terrified because I disappeared. They were terrified because the money did. Kuri sent one more text that evening. Dad says you don't understand the damage you're causing. Please don't punish everyone because your feelings got hurt. My feelings, not my consent, not my property, not the email calling me manageable, just my feelings. For 10 minutes, I stood with the phone in my hand and almost called her. I still loved the woman I had married. That does not vanish because truth arrives. Part of me wanted to stop the collapse, to be the calm man again, to say, let's sit down and fix this. Then another thought cut through. If I rescue them now, what exactly am I teaching them? That they can humiliate me and still use me, that they can question my judgment and still ask for my signature, that family security means I am secure only when I obey. The following morning, I drove to the marina because I needed air and something real beneath my hands. Nolan was there, stacking dockboards near the office. He did not ask for details. Men who have been through family wreckage recognize the look. "Rough week?" he said. "People are calling it rough because I finally stopped making it easy." He nodded once. "People don't respect boundaries they never believed you'd enforce." That sentence stayed with me as I drove back to the cottage. I was finished defending myself to people who needed me weak to keep their story strong. By sundown, Marin emailed a scanned document she wanted me to review before our next meeting. The file name was plain enough, Supplemental Investor Assurance, but the first paragraph made my hand go still. Someone outside the family had already been promised that my house would stand behind the deal, and from the tone of that document, they were not planning to walk away quietly. Marin called at 7:12 the next morning. I was standing in the cottage kitchen, waiting for coffee to finish dripping into an old ceramic pot, when her name lit up my phone. No lawyer calls that early to chat about the weather. "Rex," she said, "we have a meeting request." "From Khoury?" "From everyone." By everyone, she meant Lowell, Khoury, Verity, Blaze Renner, 2 investor representatives, a credit union officer, and a commercial attorney named Syra Belmont. The Mariner House deal was not cracking anymore. It was coming apart in public. The meeting took place 2 days later, in a conference room in Traverse City. Long table, water pitcher, yellow legal pads. Men in jackets who looked angry before anyone sat down. Khoury was already there when I arrived with Marin. She looked smaller than I expected. Lowell did not. He leaned back in his chair like the room still belonged to him. Verity sat beside Khoury, lips pressed thin, hands folded over her purse. Blaze Renner started first. "We were told family-backed property security was forthcoming," he said. That language appeared in multiple assurances. Lowell cleared his throat. "There was a domestic misunderstanding." Marin opened her folder. I knew that sound. Paper sliding against paper. Calm. Final. Syra Belmont looked directly at me. "Mr. Calder, were you aware your residence was being referenced as part of projected liquidity?" "No." Lowell turned toward her. "Rex knew we were discussing family planning." I kept my hands flat on the table. Discussing my future is not the same as getting my consent. Khoury looked down. One investor, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, tapped her pen once. "Why were we told family capital was secured?" Nobody answered. That silence did more damage than shouting could have. Then Lowell tried the turn I knew was coming. "Rex has been under strain," he said, voice softened for effect. "Selling the house suddenly, disappearing from his wife, refusing conversation. We have concerns about his judgment." Verity added, "He has not been himself." There it was, the careful little knife. Not angry, not loud, just enough to make people wonder whether the man at the table might be the problem. For a moment, I felt the room shift. Not fully against me, but curious, measuring. Older men know that look. It is the look people give when they start deciding whether your independence is courage or decline. Marin did not argue feelings. She built a wall with dates. She placed the family security notes on the table, the hotel emails, the capacity checklist, the page with my home's value circled. Then she played 37 seconds of the voicemail. Khoury's voice filled the room. "He's been a good man, but lately he's just a burden." No one moved. Then Lowell's voice followed. "Then stop treating him like the decision maker." The silence afterward was not empty. It was crowded with things people could no longer pretend they did not understand. Khoury covered her mouth. Lowell's face changed color. Verity whispered, "That was private." I looked at her. "So was my life." Marin continued. She read from an email chain. Not dramatically, just clearly. "Rex remains manageable if we keep the timeline moving. Use concern language. Do not say forced move. Say relief. Residential component must remain on schedule." Each sentence landed harder because nobody had to explain it. The words explained themselves. Blaze sat back and rubbed one hand over his jaw. "Lowell, you represented this as reliable." Lowell's voice sharpened. "It was reliable until Rex decided to sabotage his own family." That word finally reached the old part of me. The easy one. The peacekeeper. The man who would rather absorb pain than make others uncomfortable. But that man did not pick up the pen. I leaned forward. "You didn't lose my house when I sold it. You lost it the day you started treating my future like an asset report." Kuri began to cry then, quietly. I told myself we would talk to you, she said. I kept thinking once the timing was better, once Dad had everything lined up, you'd understand. I convinced myself the house would be available eventually. Available, I repeated. She closed her eyes. I know. Lowell tried one more time. This family had opportunities, Rex. Real opportunities. You could have helped. Family should ask family. That ended something. Not the legal issues, not the financial mess, not the marriage, but the argument that I had somehow failed them by refusing a role I never agreed to play. Syra gathered her papers. Her voice was professional, but no longer neutral. My clients will be reviewing all representations connected to this matter. Blaze would not look at Lowell. Verity stared at the table. Kuri looked at me like she had finally found the man she had been stepping around, only to learn he was already gone. As we left, I thought about the broken mug at the cottage. I had kept it because a crack did not erase usefulness, but repair requires truth. Without that, broken things do not heal. They just sit on shelves while people call them fine. When the meeting finally ended, nobody walked away a winner. The only question left was whether anything worth saving still remained. The answer did not come that day. It did not come the next week either. People like to imagine a clean ending after a confrontation. Somebody apologizes. Somebody pays. Somebody walks out into the sunlight and never looks back. Real life is not that tidy. It settles in layers. The hotel project collapsed before Christmas. Not with sirens or front-page headlines, but with canceled meetings, withdrawn investors, revised contracts, and attorneys using phrases like material reliance and disputed representation. Blaze Renner stopped returning Lowell's calls. The credit union backed away from anything tied to projected family capital. Syra Belmont sent letters that sounded polite enough until you reached the final paragraph. Lowell did not go to jail. Verity did not stand in a courtroom begging forgiveness. Kuri did not suddenly become a different person because truth embarrassed her. Consequences came slower than that, and in some ways, slower made them harder. By January, Kuri had moved into a small condo on the edge of town. I heard that from Orson, not from her. He said it gently while helping me unload a workbench at my new place. Looks like she downsized after all, he said. I gave him a look. He raised both hands. Too soon? Maybe by about 10 years. He laughed, and for once, I did too. My new home was not grand. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, a small porch facing the water through a stand of birch trees. The kitchen cabinet stuck a little in damp weather, and the garage only fit 1 truck if I angled it right. But every inch of it was mine. Not because of paperwork, though the paperwork mattered, because no one had moved into it with plans for me. I hung my father's fishing rod above the garage window. My mother's recipe box went on a shelf near the stove. I kept 3 photographs and boxed the rest. I bought a chair that faced the lake and did not ask anyone whether it matched the room. That kind of freedom sounds small until you have lived without it. Kuri began writing letters in February. Real letters. Paper, envelope, stamp. The first one stayed unopened on my table for 4 days. I knew her handwriting too well. Even the curve of the K could pull me backward. When I finally read it, there were no excuses on the first page. That surprised me. She wrote that she had confused loyalty with obedience. She wrote that Lowell's approval had meant too much to her. She wrote that once the hotel deal became real, she had kept telling herself there would be time to make things right. There is always time in a liar's mind, until there is not. I did not answer that letter, or the second. The third made me sit down. I knew your father's mug mattered to you. I knew the house was not just property. I knew, Rex. That is the part I have to live with. I folded the page and placed it back in the envelope. Healing does not move at the speed of regret. Spring came late that year. The ice pulled away from the shoreline in gray sheets, and the first green shoots appeared beside the porch steps. One morning, I carried coffee outside in my father's mug. The handle was still broken. I had never fixed it. Orson noticed when he stopped by with a bag of potting soil. Never repaired that thing? I turned the mug in my hand. No. Still using it? Every week. He nodded like that made sense. For years, I thought keeping it meant loyalty. Now I understood something different. Damage you admit to can still have a place in your life. Damage you hide will run the house from behind the walls. That was the difference. Nearly a year after the meeting, Kuri came to see me. She called Marin first, which told me she had learned at least one boundary. We met on my porch on a clear afternoon when the lake was flat and bright. She looked older. So did I, probably. She did not ask for money. She did not mention the hotel. She did not defend Lowell or Verity. She sat with both hands around a paper cup of coffee and said, "I am sorry I treated your silence like permission." That sentence did not repair everything, but it was the first honest sentence she had given me in a long while. "I forgive enough to put down the weight," I told her. "I don't forget enough to pick it back up." She cried then, quietly, without asking me to comfort her. That mattered. We did not reconcile that day. We did not make promises. We talked like two people standing near the ruins of something they once lived in, careful not to pretend it was still a home. A few weeks later, a small box arrived at my door. Inside were tomato seedlings wrapped in damp paper. There was one note: "For your new garden. Thank you for finally standing up for yourself." Kuri had signed only her name. I planted them along the south side of the porch, where the sun stayed longest. Some grew. 2 did not. That seemed about right. People ask whether I think I won. I do not think winning is the right word for losing a marriage, selling a home, and learning that the people closest to you had been discussing your future like a line item. But I did get something back. My choice, my name, my voice. Peace is not something other people hand you after they approve of your decisions. Peace begins when you stop surrendering your worth to keep everyone else comfortable. My house was never the thing they almost took from me. My voice was, and getting that back was worth more than every dollar.